What is going on, all you beautiful people out there, and welcome back into ByerlyStudios for another project video. Now, this is video number 3 in the Mad Mike Studios 68 Robot Man build, where I am sculpting this base that you see here from Sculpey Original. It is mounted to a birch board that's been stained and clear coated. Now, the clay has been sculpted in concrete texture, as well as a metal plate was sculpted separately and added later after it was painted in metallics to give it a nice ultra metallic sheen. I also added some hand painted hazard tape there, as well as an electrical hazard sign also. Now that has not been clear coated yet. It will be clear coated in a later stage. In video number 2 here, you can see that I created the work boots. Like I said in that video, that was a little bit of a challenge, but it was something new and it was very fun to do. So if you haven't had the opportunity to check out the first 2 videos, definitely hop over there and do that. Now this is video number 3 in the series, where I'm going to be sculpting his blue jeans as well as his fireman work jacket, which he wears in the studio quite often. So I hope you enjoyed the previous videos, and I'm glad you were able to join me for video number 3 in this series. So let's jump into it. So as we kind of continue through this series, I'm going to pull in reference photos that I'm using to sculpt the more detailed pieces of this project. So as I'm bulking out on the right hand side, you can see I've also went ahead and notated what items I'd really like to cover on the left hand side. These are notes that I took, and then I just kind of wrote them in red ink. So pale yellow jacket, I want to make sure that those reflective pieces are there. Make sure that I add the pockets. I want to have that overlapping flap in the front. I want to make sure I get his work gloves, and he needs jeans and boots. We've already done the boots. Let's get the jeans blocked in. Now you can kind of see, because the boots and the jeans were kind of one piece, I kind of did those somewhat blocking in as at the same time. So we're going to kind of run in through where we finish up the blue jean blocking in, sculpt it a little bit as we work our way up the tumbler. So I like this process of this build is because we've started it from the base, we've worked into the boots, we're working the blue jeans and the jacket and the armature arms, and then we just continue our way up the project as we get to more and more videos, which is kind of fun. Here I am, I'm trying to get an idea of how long I'd like for his arms to be. Now, like I said, he's going to be kind of like a bobblehead, kind of a cartoonish look to him, but I also want to add as many of those details to bring it some realism as possible. So I want that healthy blend between realism and cartoonism, so that it's just a really fun piece for him just to look at all the, once in a while he may look over at the shelf and be like, man, that's so fun, so awesome to have. And that's what I want. I want him to enjoy what he has, and I want it to be one of those little trophies that he just kind of hangs on to forever. So it's very cool. So what I'm doing now is I'm just using a tool to remove some clay. I'm just kind of thinking about how my blue jeans flow. I don't want him to have any pockets visible, because those fireman jackets hang pretty low. They skirt down to at least halfway down the thigh at some point. So I don't want to have too much detail in the blue jeans. I'm gonna kind of like texture them a little bit before I do the final bake on this thing. But I just want to get an idea of where I want things to be before I move into the next stages. So you can kind of see here where I'm adding the layer of clay at the top of the tumbler here. And that's almost where I would like for the jacket somewhat to end. I do go a little bit higher than that in the later blocking in stages. But this is all just me getting clay onto the stainless steel and just getting coverage so that I can build up a little bit of meat where it needs to be, and then remove some of those negative spots for some detail work. So as you can see here, I'm kind of building out a little bit of the shoulder there. I do that just so that I can get an idea of how the jacket's going to sit on the actual body. And by kind of blocking in where I want those like large shoulders, or where the puffiness of the jacket that comes away from the main jacket to the arm segment, I want to make sure I kind of get an idea how I want that to sit on the sides of the body, and that kind of is going to help me decide where I want the pockets, the overlap flap, and any stitching to be as I design and build the jacket out. I've never done any type of sculpting like this, where I've done blue jeans, boots, or even the concrete base. I've never done some of this stuff, so it's very cool to kind of break away, do something new, and then if it doesn't work out, it's clay. I can scrape it off and redo it. I don't have to do that during any of these portions of the build, but I'm just saying, if something's not the way you desire it to be, you can just simply just scrape it off and fix it. I love polymer clay because it gives you so much versatility to repair issues or just kind of tinker with it, keep working, working, working until you get the desired effect. It's not like paint where you keep working and working and working. Either you'll make mud or just will give you a too thick of a paint structure. This is something you can just continuously work. Some people work on sculptures like this for weeks and weeks and weeks. I did this in a matter of probably about a week or so, maybe more. I'm just saying that that's the great thing about clay is it just gives you so much control over what you're making, and you can really take your time and enjoy the process of making something, adding, taking away clay until you get the desired effect. So if you haven't had the opportunity to work with clay before, I recommend you just go to Walmart and buy a block of Sculpey Original and just join it and join the trend, see how you like it, and really have fun with designing something that you've just never done before. All right, so back to the project, and enough of me ranting and just talking. So this is where I'm just removing some of the clay a little bit at a time, until I get the overall fabric or blue jean texture type of flow that I want. I'm not going to add a ton of detail to this. I just want it to have some nice flowing fabric look to it. And then I might come in with some type of paper or maybe like a stencil or something like that, or maybe like a coarse fabric. And I may apply a little bit of stippling to it, but that's just small potatoes in the overall build itself. And I do go ahead and add a little bit of meat to his butt. It just would look weird if it was all the same, depth. So I went ahead and added a little bit more material to the back end. So as you can see, that clay is pretty rough still. Now later on in the process, right before I get ready to bake it, the night before, usually I'll take a little bit of rubbing alcohol and just a coarse brush to it. And that just smooths out any of those little details that I'm just missing with my fingers. It will also remove any fingerprints I leave behind from messing with it in the final stages. But this is just me kind of smoothing it with just my finger without a glove on it. You can do it with a glove too. It's just when you can actually feel the clay underneath your finger, it's a little bit differently. So I'm just going to kind of smooth things out, and then I'll do this every once in a while if I see a place that's a little bit raised or just I feel like it's drawing my eye a little bit too much. I'll try to fix it a little bit as I go. But overall, the kind of flowing fabric texture, it's really getting there. And then once I get it to where I like it, and it's kind of, I can kind of leave it now and move on to the next stage. We'll work our way up into his jacket. All right, so with the detail work on the blue jeans, kind of pretty much how I like it for the most part. I'm gonna leave it for now, and I may come back later to a little bit of detail work. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of seating in a piece of armature wire, and I'm kind of angling that to see how I would like for the arm to be placed. So he is going to be holding the accessory. I'm still working on that design, but that will be one of the last videos in the series before I go on to paint. But I'm super excited about it, and I'm hoping to try to add a light element to this. If nothing else, I would leave the option for a light element to be added later. I know that he works with light elements in a lot of his robots, so the fact that I may give him the opportunity to install his own size of lighting or whichever grade of lighting he wants, whether that be an actual electrical plug or a battery powered one, I'm gonna probably leave it open to his decision, and then he can install that. I'm gonna make it super easy for him to do so. So now I'm beginning the process of kind of like just pushing down that existing clay I had built up around the skirt of the jacket, and I'm adding slight wrinkles. Now a lot of these wrinkles will kind of get washed out as I add different layers, but this is also a process that helps me get a feel for how the fabric is. If I just leave it flat and I start adding details, I don't feel connected to the fabric, and I feel like adding some of those wrinkles in where they need to be is important. And I'm using the reference photo up on the right hand side, as you can see. So I'll kind of post that every so often when I focus on one specific part of the jacket, just because there's a lot of details to this, and I want you to also see what I'm seeing, what am I thinking when I'm adding something. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that up there, and then it'll kind of pop in and out throughout the build of the jacket itself. Now this is me adding that overlapping flap on the front of the jacket, and it will have a little bit of stitch work, but I'm kind of blending that in to the left hand side of the jacket, and then it overlaps on the right hand side. That is a flat segment, and I'll kind of round the edge of that a little bit and smooth it out. All right, so then I'm going to roll over the top kind of lip of that flap. Now that flap is open and closed depending on what he's choosing to do with the jacket, I'm sure. Some of the photos that I was able to pull from TikTok and reference photos that his wife sent me just showed it kind of closed. I decided to go with closed just so it kind of decreased the overall aspect ratio of the build. But I think overall, I think I like the effect. I like that little flap kind of going across there, and as long as I can keep that edge a pretty sharp edge, it looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and add the pocket on his left hand side, our right hand side, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And it starts off as just a wrinkled piece of square, a rectangle clay, and I kind of blend the edges just so it doesn't kind of pull up off of the actual jacket base itself. And then I left a lot of recess around the edges so that it just has room for like some shading maybe there. And then it just adds some wrinkles to the outside edges of the actual pocket itself. That's a very large pocket, and it is going to have some reflective tape or reflective paint going across it, so it will kind of increase the overall dimension of that when it all comes together. Then I'm going to go ahead and add, well, I actually cut this multiple times, but I add a pocket flap that goes across the top, and then I come back later on down the road and I add a secondary line across that as well, just to add a little bit more fabric there. There was my first attempt at that, and then there it is again. I go ahead and blend that just a thin line, just add a little wrinkle there. It just is kind of increases the shape of that top part of that pocket. I just liked how that looked right there. Just push it down with my finger just to kind of get some of those sharp edges off, make it look more like a wrinkle. And then I'm just kind of blending the fabric around it. So then we're going to move on, as you can see, to his right hand side pocket, and this is more of a cargo pocket on the jacket. And I'm just going to kind of bulk it out and then kind of add wrinkles as I go along. I like to add the pocket flap second, and I think it allows me to add a little bit more recess to the edges of that and a little bit more dimension without having to actually push and pull and prod the clay into position. Adding that second is much easier. I'm just going to add the wrinkles to the top of the pocket flap there. You can see it in the reference photo on the right hand side. I'm trying to mimic that as closely as possible. I know that the wrinkles are probably not always the same when he lays his jacket down, but a lot of that Carhartt type material or that fire hose material kind of holds its shape quite a bit, and I'm hoping that just translates over in a really realistic way. So I'm trying to kind of follow the existing wrinkles and the existing shade of the jacket itself. Again, blending that with my finger there before moving on to the next step. The next step being the stitching. Again, on the right hand side, you can see the reference photo. I'm just gently prodding and pushing the clay with a daggered edge there, and it's just giving me the simulation of stitching. I'm hoping that me doing this will allow the wash to settle into that, and hopefully the base acrylics and the base coats don't completely wash those out, but we'll see how that goes. So now I'm going to start adding little wrinkles in here and there, little cutaway recesses. This is small potatoes in the overall grand scheme of things, but like I said, just with the stitching, I'm hoping that some of that survives the painting process and shows some detail through the paint. So now I'm going to go ahead and start beginning to block in the his left-hand arm. It'll be on our right-hand side when he's facing us. However, I'm just kind of blocking that in. I need to get the meat on that armature wire so it doesn't shift as I start to add that in. Now, I did not add the armature wire all the way around to both arms. This time I did individual segments of armature wire. They're a little bit weaker as I'm working on them, but I think they were pretty straightforward in the way that they weren't heavy enough to really move that wire a whole lot. So before I can do the arm, I have to do that under pocket, because once I do the arm, all of this is really hard to get to. Even his armpit, where the jacket makes contact with the main jacket body, is hard to get to when that arm is in place. So I had to go ahead and get his left hand side cargo pocket on the jacket completed. I'm using the back end of my silicone sculpting tool to try to add some wrinkles to that pocket. Same way as we did the other one. Alright, so with the pocket underneath the arm done, I went ahead and began actually working on the arm itself. Now this is his left hand side arm, and it's going to come up and away from the body, and he's going to be holding a accessory, which I will sculpt and create on a later video. So just hang tight, I'll get to that at some stage, but this is me filling it out the arm in a bulk layer of clay, and then I'm going to kind of texture that in the same texture as the jacket in a fabric fashion. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sculpt a work glove, the work glove cuff, and then the cuff of the jacket before it goes into the actual fabric of the sleeve. So there's multiple layers there, and they all have to be textured in their own individual ways. The glove cuff is going to have a checkered, very coarse fabric. So I'm going to try to figure out a way I can stencil that on there, so that way I can kind of retain that overall fabric. And when I paint that, it kind of will isolate that cuff away from the rest of the gloves and the changes in layers. So you'll see me develop these over the next few minutes here as I build out that work glove. I think the overall finish, they really turned out great. I think the aspect ratio between the work glove, the arm, and the body, it really works. I'm really happy with how it turns out. But this is just me beginning the processes of bulking out that arm. So sit back and enjoy. Alright, so here I am kind of starting the process of texturing that glove. Now this is the cuff to the glove, so I'm using a flat silicone tool just to kind of add pressure and flatten that clay out. And so I'll continuously work this until I just get the desired overall levels of fabric that I want. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's glove, glove cuff, and then there's a cuff to the jacket, and then there's the jacket itself, and then some of the cuffs they look like they recess into the actual fabric of the jacket. I'm gonna bend and change the way that the glove is shaped there, and then what I'll do is once I get that on there, I'll cut out the individual fingers, and then I'll kind of shape those with a silicone tool just so they have like a smooth edges and they're not so blocky. And then I'll use the back of my tools to add wrinkles to the gloves just to give it some variation and give the simulation of rough leather or worn fabric. So I really just wasn't happy with how thick the arm jacket was. So I decided to continuously add more meat and clay in and texture that into the fabric until I just got the overall thickness, so I could get the aspect ratio right. So I'll add clay multiple times all the way around the arm until I get the thickness that I just really feel like I need there. All right, so without removing a bunch of the content, I decided to go ahead and put the second side on there as well. I want y'all to be able to see the process for this specifically because when I add the armature wire to this, and I use the thinner gauge for this because I just didn't feel like it needed that thick a gauge for such a small arm. And this one's not being pushed out away from the body as much, so it's not as susceptible to breakage. But the problem is I needed to texture the underneath of that armpit when I got that clay layered on. So I actually positioned the arm quite high, almost like a chicken wing, until I got the armpit blended in the way that I wanted to. And then once I get the entire arm sculpted properly, with the extra room of having it chicken winged out, I'm able to bring the trajectory of the arm down by just bending the arm down gently until it's almost close to the body, but still separate. So it just really looks good. Now, like I said, he's going to be holding an accessory, so we'll get to that stage later. So they're positioned the way that they are for a specific reason. I know it kind of is hard to imagine why they're kind of angled this way, but you'll see later on in the process that it really comes together. So I haven't pushed his arm down yet. Just remember that the arm is really high, and here in a moment when I push it down, it just looks more realistic in the position that he's sitting at. All right, so same process as before. Just sit back and enjoy the process for the second arm. And then once we get done with this portion, we'll move on to the final few stages before the actual jacket itself is completed. Overall, it's turning out pretty good so far, and I'm really happy with how just the overall detail work from the bottom up is coming together. It's really cool. So sit back and enjoy the show. All right, so with that arm really how I like it, I'm gonna go ahead and now pressure and bend that downward. It doesn't break any of the clay, it doesn't create any cracks. It's just a gentle force down to bend it to where it needs to be. So I do bring the forearm down just a little bit so that it's holding at a downward angle. And it's just, I like that they're different levels of arms. They're not the same level. It looks really good. So there's also a neck flap above that pocket. I wanted to go ahead and incorporate that in as well before I add his collar into the overall jacket build. There is also a brand logo tag on the front seam of that flap on the front of the jacket. I went ahead and added that. I'll probably just paint that just a Mars black, and then it'll pop in comparison to the canvas or the reflective paint. So I'll probably keep that pretty simple, but I just still wanted to incorporate that in just because there's so much detail in the front. I just think it'd be a good additive to that. So now I'm gonna go ahead and texture the back of the jacket a little bit as I go. I'm adding little wrinkles and striations to the bottom of the jacket. There is a stitching there. I don't think I'm gonna put that stitching in. I think I'm gonna just kind of keep it simple. I'm also adding some score marks where the reflective paint or reflective tape fabric would have been on the cup or the jacket. And then I'm also going to add wrinkles around his shoulders where I feel like they would be wrinkled. All right, so with that portion pretty much complete, we're moving on to almost the final stage now of the jacket, and that's adding the collar. Now, the collars for these fireman jackets are very thick. They're very, very durable, and they're made to last, right? So it's a very thick rollover, and I made that clay thick on purpose, so I'm able to cut away any of the excess I don't need. The distinguishing factor here is that it has a large was the curvature to the collarbone right there, and I want to make sure that that's there. So I'll put a lot of shadow underneath the collarbone roll over there, so it just looks really good and it pops. And then probably the top of that collar right there will have some highlights on it. So I'll kind of just change that up with the colors of the paint just to give it more definition. But you can kind of see I'm just rolling that over, and then it's going to go up into his head. He's not going to have much of a net because, like I said, a little bit of cartoonish is okay. All right, so as I'm just finalizing some of these like extra small details, one of the last stages I do is I went ahead and I cut away the excess from that collar all the way around the back of the neck, and I'll kind of push that down. And then what that allows me to do is I don't waste that clay. Instead of just adding it back to my back stock of clay, I'm able to make use of that. So I don't do that around the front just because I don't need all that meat around his chest, but I will push that down around the shoulder blades and down his back. And that also helps me to blend the back portion of the jacket with the excessively thick collar. I want that collar to be slightly thick, and by having that extra meat around his shoulder blades, it makes it look proper because his head and his hair and all that is going to be quite large just because of the diameter of the 30-ounce skinny tumbler. So I want that all to look kind of seamless, and the 30-ounce cup, as thick as it is, adds a different level of difficulty to that, because if this was just a sculpture, I would be able to sculpt the neck and the head and thin it out as much as I need to, but because the 30-ounce skinny is as thick as it is, I can't thin that out like I need to. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of texture to his back, and I'm going to finalize that. I'm also blending down that excess clay from the collar, just smoothing that out the best that I can. Like I said, it may get a little coat of rubbing alcohol later on down the road, but I'm really liking how this thing has turned out so far. Adding the pants and the jacket and the arms and the gloves to the boots and the base is really starting to allow it to come together. So I'm so excited to bring in the fourth video in this series, which will be me sculpting his face and his head, and then I'll probably, depending on the length, make a fifth video of his hair cup topper, and then we'll continue on from there. As long as the videos aren't too long, I'll continue going with what we're going with, but otherwise, this is where we are at this stage. So stay tuned for video number 4 in the series. Otherwise, let's sit back and enjoy some awesome glamour shots of this work. Again, thank you for all you do, you amazing subscribers here on YouTube. If you're watching any of the highlight clips on TikTok, thank you for tuning in. Otherwise, guys, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.